working for the state, maybe once every 6 months I'll get a phone call, or I'll get an email, or I'll get a letter from somebody who says, my grandmother came from Alaska, and I know she was adopted, and I know we have Native blood. How do I get in contact with them? And I think there's 229 approved federal tribes, plus more. And some of these folks have an idea that they're from Alaska, but not what part or what piece. And sometimes with the picture, I can get an idea because I've been here long enough, but sometimes I can't. So it's sort of sad to see them lose that history, and because this land is theirs. This land was built on the blood of their relatives, and they should have an opportunity to set their feet into it and smell the fresh air, and to admire the mountains, and to know that it belongs to them.
I guess I could share a story. When I first started my position, I was not even in the position, I don't think, 3 months. And then I got a message from an elderly man, and he had wanted the immediate consideration for placement of his niece. And he had been calling for 3 months. He called 3 times and left messages. And then 3 months went by and he stopped calling, and then he called me. And when I asked him, why didn't you keep on calling? He goes, well, in the news, it said OCS was down workers and everybody was so busy, I didn't want to bother. And that's something. That's something one of my uncles would say. They didn't want to bother. But it's a sense of being humble, and it's a sense of being respectful. And how we're raised is to be respectful and to be humble, not brag, but try to help and give everything. And if our caseworkers just take a step back and hear and listen, rather than going in there and making judgment, or going in there and making up their mind based on something written on paper without talking to people, they're gonna miss everything, and we're gonna lose our children again.
We're on the beach, and it was May, so we caught a nice big king, probably about a 50-pounder, and I was cutting the head off and showing them what we do to make fish soup. And one of our chaperones happened to be a grandpa of one of my students. And I didn't know she was Native. And this grandpa is standing there and he's crying. And so when I got done with the head and with the kids, what's the matter, you know? And he said, I finally know I'm home. It makes me so emotional, because as a young child in Alaska, he was adopted out. He was one of the children that we lost. And he was adopted out to a non-Native family, lived in the lower 48 sometime, and he spent his life trying to find home. And it took him a long time. He was in his 60s. And it wasn't until he came down to the beach and was fishing and that he actually felt like he knew where he was from. And he was actually from Ninilchik, which is just a little hop down from where we live on the Cook Inlet. And so from there, it became a reality that what had happened not only to my mother and in generations past, was still existing. It was still happening today the same way, and it needed to stop.
I think that the biggest takeaway that I think that they can think about is, we're not fighting against you. We're sitting there for the best interest of our children. That these young children that are being put into foster care and everything like that once happened to possibly their grandparent, and they were told that they couldn't speak their language, they couldn't participate in ceremonies and all of that. And then you see all of that residual effects due to that. You have abuse, you have alcoholism, you have DV, you have substance abuse, all of these severe impacts due to these non-natives telling our Native people that they can't be who they are. That I hope that when they are reaching out to a tribal worker, they understand when we say, hey, we have a ceremony coming this weekend and we'd really like that young Johnny to attend, that there's a reason behind it. And please don't ever, ever, ever forget about our culture, because it was taken away from us once and we're not gonna let it happen again.
One of the biggest things to me is the stories of the ones that were affected, and also to the stories today of our elders that were during the time of boarding schools, and just their hurts and also their growths and their strengths, even though through all of what they've went through, how strong we are as a people.
I've heard a statement, an invitation that was made before by a representative from First Alaskans Institute that really touched my heart, and that was an invitation to their village, to their culture, to go see people, their people. And the statement was, if you can't see us at our best, how can you help us at our worst? To hold true respect for the culture that we are working with would be the best way that we can truly buy in on helping the community best.
I grew up learning about Icwa because it was something that my mom was really passionate about. She was a social worker with Central Council Tlingit and Haida for a long time, and she just used to come in tears sometimes because we lost so many tribal citizens, and people's families were just kind of ripped apart, torn apart, and they fumbled trying to piece themselves back together and weren't always able to reach out for help, to help heal. So I think that the Indian Child Welfare Act was put into place to help put some safeguards in place to make sure that Indian children weren't removed for no reason, and that if they were removed because they should have been removed, that they were placed with Indian families who could take care of them and who could remind them who they were, to stay grounded, and so they wouldn't be fostered and adopted out and lost.
Under Icwa, tribes have the right to intervene because that is their child. That child is, as their tribal member, their future of their tribe. So it allows them to be a part of the decision making, to really be at the table to help make these really important decisions on behalf of their child. So as a tribal member, the child not only belongs to their nuclear family, their mother, their father, their siblings, and then their grandparents and their aunties and uncles and cousins, but this other layer of belongingness, the tribe. So it's so important to recognize that, and that tribes should be a part of all of the decisions regarding their tribal member children, because that is their future. Seeing young little ones, I often think about them as, what are they going to be like as adults? And having kids myself, just wondering how connected they might be to their community and their culture, and just hoping that for them, because I know how it's such an important part of our identity. So just hoping that they could be proud of themselves and who they are and where they're from and their family and their community, and embrace that rather than find any shame in it.
When we embrace the values and the spirit of Icwa, it's sending a clear message to the Alaska Native people and American Indian people that we value their thoughts, their feelings, their spirituality, their cultures, their ceremonies, their language, their art, and all of those things matter.
I think it's really important because the children need their culture and their traditional way of life. And I think for OCS to embrace that, I think they're, being sensitive to those families and their culture, their way of life, so that these children know who they are. We don't want to remove that from them, because then, if they were removed or taken to a foster care, I think it's important for OCS to remember that, to make sure that these children don't lose their identity and their culture. Because as they get older, they'll know who they are, and I think it's really important, because a lot of times you hear about children or kids that are struggling out, out in the world because they don't know who they are. And I think if you know your identity, your culture, your homelands, I think, it'll ground these children better. I think it's good to have that.
Manna Indian Child Welfare Act ayaganixtla anguyachtum awani 1978 tami biuchtlhok amslagat magut mikilngut mani Alaska mi kingan bifgnani trakum jali akmani du malalhut mikilngui ristnun angayu kaitnik du maluting makun lufastra homan and li maluting Damani alchun biuchtlani amsrugat mikilngut ma du malalhut I baim dalu I baim nun kaun kistnun li makluting amsmilu makunun group homanun wallu makun institution na nagpilakait nagsiwik nun kasat ay paim ta apkait nig institution at makut siwit inriwit treatment center at tamakutlu amsakat si malaktu tamakunun si malalhut amsmilu angayukamnun utchimak saunating adaptaw makluting sumakunun ay paimtnun. Tama na pitkluku manna Icwa piuchtlhok awani chiokfagni 1978 tami ukakfakunlu dukneri kanirluku angwecht malchkut nguchluku December 2016 nami dukneri kanirluku pilhot magutlu tribe at muknik auluk sukhngita matum Icwam pilhkilagait adanich tulkait muknik biauchtlkait kwa pitklugu daum kmatum Icwam magutray batjali chikilakay makun binichkait nik laita ikhneating ilaklkhitlu magut auluk sukungalu.